live from the drama-free true crime destination. It's the time where every story finds its edge, every opinion lands with weight, and every moment leads here. This is the final word.
Oh, he's standing up. Let's go ahead and go in.
Back on the record, all parties are present. Hold off the jury. I'm told the jury has reached a verdict. Before we receive the verdict, particularly in this case, it's imperative that whoever remains here in the courtroom while we receive the verdict remains stoic and does not express himself or herself with joy or sadness or whatever it is, because there's a potential that the case continues, and that would be improperly influencing the case going on. So if you're here, make sure you can contain yourself and do not react whatsoever when the verdict comes in. If you cannot control yourself at this time, please leave, and someone else will tell you what happened. Is everyone clear on that? All right. Let's bring in the jury, and we'll receive the verdict. Please hand the verdict form to the bailiff, who will hand it to me for review before it's published. The verdict is in proper form. The defendant shall remain standing while the verdict is published through the clerk.
We, the jury, find Jose Soto Escalera as to count 1, guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. If you find the defendant guilty as charged or guilty of any of the above lesser offenses, you must next determine if any of the following has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Check yes if proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Check no if not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. During the commission of the offense, the defendant did carry, display, use, threaten to use, or attempt to use any weapon. Yes. As to count 2, guilty of first-degree murder of an unborn child as charged in the indictment. So say we all. This 19th day of September, 2020.
On the sheet here. Mr. Monte, is this your verdict as well as the verdict of the jury as a whole?
Well, there you have it. Guilty verdict. No real reaction from the defendant in that case, but this case was a long time in the making. 7 years ago, 23-year-old Tanya Wise and her unborn baby. She was 8.5 months pregnant with his baby. She was found face down in a ditch, and now the jury just found him guilty of first-degree murder for the murder of Tanya Wise and their baby.
The only reason why I brought it up, Your Honor, is because something has surfaced with a witness and it was recorded in audio. This is why I'm requesting that I would have him removed. But if I can't remove him, I would like you to see what I'm speaking about so you can understand what I'm trying to say. If you have the time, Your Honor.
With regard to that, that would be a decision in this very important context for your attorneys to make, whether to submit that issue to me as far as potential mitigation. And as I'm required to do, I would defer to their professional decision in that regard.
I think enough, Judge. I'm going to lay it all out on the record, okay? I think Mr. Soto Escalera is hurting his situation. He's proceeding in ignorance on the advice of ignorant people. What he is referring to is a Zoom recorded deposition, the first such deposition I ever did in my life. We witnessed Lucinda Cook. This was done, I think, on a Tuesday when it was a court holiday when we were in the midst of trial or jury selection. I'm not sure exactly where we were yet. And before Ms. Cook joined, there was a recording with chit-chat between me and Mr. Richardson about witnesses in the case, about the state of the case, about why I was calling witnesses and not calling witnesses, and complaining about somebody who had Ms. Minton's credit card and was going over the limits, and chit-chatting as counsel do between themselves waiting for a witness. And I don't think people understand the context of how attorneys talk to each other. I think that the witnesses who overheard this, Ms. Lucinda Cook and whoever else she communicated with, think that because this is a capital murder case, me and Mr. Richardson should be like this with our hands around each other's throats every moment. And we were not that way. We were chatting as counsel do in a case. And in a capital case especially, do counsel and adversaries have to communicate frequently and exhaustively to get the thing from start to finish done. That's all that it was. There is nothing in there that was inimical to Mr. Jose Soto Escalera's defense, and I defy him or anyone else to point to any action or anything that I did or said at any point in the preparation of this case or in the trial or in the penalty phase that was contrary to his interest. It's nonsense and bullcrap, and that's what he's on about, Judge. So he can feel however he wants. He's an idiot. On this issue, at least.
In that regard, for Mr. Soto Escalera's benefit, the people who are here observing this proceeding, regardless of the court's sentencing decision, whether I impose a life sentence or a death sentence, there are appeals that take place directly and then indirect appeals which relate to assistance of counsel, whether the defendant received proper assistance of counsel. That's for a different day. I could see this coming up perhaps in that scenario on the merits to be figured out at that time as appropriate, which goes back to what I said before. The evidence is in, mitigation has been placed before me, so we're at that stage where I'm to consider that. Put differently, if Mr. Soto Escalera feels that Mr. Burns did not properly litigate his case for whatever reason, there will be a proceeding in that regard. But to be fair to Mr. Burns' respected counsel before the court, usually what has to be shown, or what would have to be shown, is something of substance, not just some idle remark we see from criminal defendants all the time, like, my attorney is working for the state, because look, they're smiling at each other and they're acting as professionals and not constantly cursing and berating each other and putting each other down. That's not the expectation of the court. In fact, we foster the opposite as professionals, that they get along, because once this case is over, they'll be on to a next case, and so will I. And so as professionals, they have to work with each other. But more importantly, as I mentioned at the outset, that is for another day. I'm directly focused on the extremely consequential and important decision I have to make, which goes back to whether Mr. Soto Escalera wants to make a statement regarding himself, the case, for me to consider. He does not have to, and it's not going to affect him negatively if he doesn't, but he has that right to do that. So there again, we broached a different subject. I don't want him to think that I'm not going to listen to that, should he wish to listen to make that statement. On the other hand, I'm not sure he has an intent to do that anyway. He just wanted to broach this subject.
Judge, I think he
Okay.
said his piece and he has nothing
Okay.
to say at this
All
time.
right. So it's not the first time I've had to tell the defendant or someone else, that's for another day. There is a right to have a motion for post-conviction relief with regard to your Sixth Amendment right to counsel. That's for another day, really, regardless of my decision here. So other than that, that concludes the Spencer hearing evidence from the defense. Any evidence from the state before argument?
No evidence, sir.
All right, so let's start off with the argument of the state, if you wish to make a summary argument. But you don't have to. I mean, obviously, I'm familiar with my role here. I want to dissuade you from that, but you do both have the right to make argument to influence me in the way I evaluate the evidence,
Sure.
the way the aggravation and mitigation.
Yes, sir. I would just say that based on the extensive evidence that was adduced in the trial and the penalty phase, based on the aggravated factor findings of the jury, as well as the verdicts of the jury as a whole, the state request that the court impose 2 death sentences in this case on both counts. Thank you.
Thank you. And the defense, Mr. Burns.
Yes, I do have a few comments to make, Judge, in the nature of argument, some of them addressing aggravators and some just in general. One of the things that needs to be considered and proved is that there was heightened premeditation in this case. I think certainly there was evidence that this case was planned and thought about at least for some days before the actual killing occurred. I don't know how extensive or how important the court would consider the testimony of the witness who indicated that Jose was interested in ghost guns, I think a couple of weeks before the killing. I don't know whether that manifests as an expression of an intent to do anything wrong. This was not a shooting or a gun crime. It did not arouse in the witness's mind at the time that there was anything nefarious going on. He thought that Jose might have been building a gun for sale. And so what we have here, the evidence in the case was that this was a pregnancy of many months' duration that Jose objected to from the start, and yet there was no evidence of any kind of intent to do anything wrong until only a few days before the actual event. And so I would ask the court to consider that. On this next issue, again, I don't like to tread here, but these are just unsavory matters to begin with. Regarding the aggravator of child under 12, I certainly do not dispute that that aggravator is correctly found. I do offer for the court's consideration that the manifestation of that aggravator in this case is as mild as could be. I don't want to state it any more bluntly than that, but what we lost here and what we mourn here in Josiah, we lose and mourn speculatively. There's no personality that has been evinced. And so I think that although that aggravator is properly found, it could be even more horrible. We have testimony from Raul Benasco relative to the court imposing a life sentence without the possibility of parole, which is what I'm asking for in regards to each victim. That Jose's been fined while he's been incarcerated for many years in a county jail, which is not designed for long-term incarceration. He would be a good prisoner. He has skills to offer. They work them hard in prison. Jose has skills to offer. I also want to ask the court to consider that the nature of persons who ought to be executed should be such that Jose doesn't really fit the category. He has no prior criminal history whatsoever. This is a dramatic departure from nothing to a very horrible crime, but it is a crime of personal circumstances. It is not a crime of randomness. It is not a crime against strangers. It is not a crime where Jose indicates that he is some kind of danger to the community at large. It is a very particularized type of crime, again, wildly at odds with his nature that we heard from his family and that we heard from Dr. Schwartz, and that is evidenced in his lack of a criminal record, which I think is really quite astounding. And finally, I think I would be remiss if I did not remind the court that although the recommendation is for death, it was as close a call as could be possible, and I would ask the court to consider that also in leaning towards life without possibility of parole for both counts. Thank you.
Thank you. Any response by the state?
No, sir.
In abundance of caution, let me ask a question to the state, and in part, this is just to avoid the appearance of us as with regard to the evidence that we glossed over anything. I have my own view of the evidence, and I'd certainly listen closely. I don't know that this was really fleshed out in argument before the jury, but with regard to the cold calculated, premeditated, aggravating factor, which was found by the jury beyond a reasonable doubt, is my perception of the evidence correct from the state's view in that it does appear that there was substantial planning fitting the definition? However, there was a variance between a lot of the planning and the actual way that the crime was committed, in the sense that there was a lot of talk of a gun, and then the murder occurred by different means, and which doesn't undo the aggravating factor, but it's something because I've never heard the state directly address that. I don't think the state directly addressed that with the jury, because it's kind of an aside, but just to cover every base, and because it was brought up by the defense, what is the state's view of the situation there with the evidence?
Yes, so the evidence, the way the evidence shook out was that there was a significant degree of planning in the days leading up to this, particularly beginning on August 21st of 2018. The defendant discussed using a firearm on multiple occasions, but the court is correct. At no time did the defendant ever discuss cutting her throat or hitting her in the head with a large blunt object, which was the ultimate cause of death in the case. So, although there was much discussion, and I think he did go back and forth on the way he would kill her, I don't recall any specific statement regarding either cutting her throat or hitting her in the head with a large blunt object. He actually, and he also did discuss using a second person, presumably a revolver, but again, there's no evidence that that was actually carried out.
And there was discussion, I have this in my notes, but just in an abundance of caution, there was discussion between the defendant and Mr. Alvarado in the garbage truck about the location of where the crime would occur.
Yes.
The route, the garbage route.
Oh, yeah, in several different conversations
Right.
that occurred. Yes, sir.
All right. Well, particularly given what was brought up with regard to counsel and so forth, I do want to commend the attorneys for their fine work. And no one can do that better than me, because it's right now squarely before me. Let me tell you where I am in the case. This is one of those situations where, as a judge, you could try to put the case out of your mind as much as possible. But I've found doing this that even when you think you're doing that, you're still thinking of this case. And I've been constantly thinking about it. I'm far along in my analytical process. However, more has been put before me today, particularly fleshing out other suggested mitigation and a few others that are also new suggested mitigation. So I have that to shore up, but I do intend to finalize my decision and announce my decision this Friday, which is the 10th. at 1:30. There's a chance that I'm not done by then, but I think I will be done by then. There again, I'm far along, and I appreciate the doctor's report. I will review it in exquisite detail and dissect it along with my notes to make the final decision in this case. Either way, the decision of the court must be in writing. So I will announce the decision on Friday at 1:30, and we'll see you then.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Your Honor.
Go off the record. And I'll end this.
A judge confirmed the jury's recommendation that a man convicted of murdering his pregnant mistress and unborn child be put to death. Jose Antonio Soto Escalera was found guilty of first-degree murder in the death of Tanya Wise and their unborn child. The jury deliberated for approximately an hour before returning its verdict. The same jury tasked with deciding whether he should face the death penalty deliberated for under 2 hours before deciding in an 8-4 vote that he should be put to death. A formal sentence was handed down after a Spencer hearing. According to court documents, the body of 23-year-old Wise was found face down in a roadside drainage ditch on August 24, 2018. At the time of her death, Wise was 8.5 months pregnant. Authorities said DNA determined Soto Escalera was the father of the unborn child, and that's according to a report from Scripps News Palm Beach. Court documents detail that Soto Escalera was married at the time of the murder. A witness told investigators that Soto Escalera had given Wise money for an abortion and believed the defendant was mad because Wise did not follow through and kept the money. So, in other words, Tanya Wise wouldn't disappear quietly. So Jose Soto Escalera took it upon himself to silence her permanently. But as you've heard today, in the state of Florida, Jose Antonio Soto Escalera was sentenced to death. No apology, no remorse, just the final word: death. I guess this won't cooperate with me today. Maybe I'll have to use another way to do this. Anyway, a wise old reaper once said that when the reaper calls your name, there is no apologies. When the reaper calls your name, there's no remorse. And when the reaper calls your name, it's over. Jose Antonio Soto Escalera, your name has been called. Unfortunately, my bell won't go off. It's okay. Tonight, this short session, the final word, results in the ultimate punishment, death. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I looked at this case and I called Jose Soto Escalera a coward. And I can tell you right now, this man will die a coward's death. He tried to hide an affair from his wife, let alone the entire world. He tried to hide it by silencing his mistress and her unborn child, his son. Instead of being man enough to own up to what he did, he didn't own up to what he did. He just decided to silence his mistress and the unborn child permanently, all in one shot. And today, as I just read and you just heard, a jury's recommended sentence has been agreed upon by the judge. And now he'll look at jail cell bars until the Grim Reaper says, it's time. And in that moment, like I said, when the Grim Reaper calls your name, it's over. No apologies, no remorse, no second chances. Just like this edition of Bethea'S Byte Reloaded. The one thing this word and death have in common, it's final. I'm Ernest Bethea, the Grim Reaper for tonight. Thanks for joining me. This is Bethea'S Byte, and it's reloaded.
Thank you all for joining me here at the Drama-Free True Crime Destination. Be sure to follow Bethea'S Byte Reloaded all over social media and get your coverage of true crime news with no gimmicks, no drama, and no BS. This is Bethea'S Byte, and it's reloaded.